If ICE knocks on your door or stops you on the street and asks, "What is your immigration status?" the answer you give in the next 10 seconds can decide the direction of your entire immigration process. And most people get it wrong precisely because they try to be too polite, over-explain, or freeze up and don't know what to do. This isn't about lying. It's not about running away. It's about knowing exactly what American law allows you to say and what you're not obligated to explain. Stick around until the end, because I'm going to give you the exact phrase that immigration lawyers recommend in this situation. If you're an immigrant in the United States, or have someone in your family in this situation, like this video now and subscribe to the channel, because this kind of information can be the difference between protecting your rights or losing control of your own story. I need to make one thing very clear from the start. This is not a tutorial on how to lie, make up a story, or run from an authority. That doesn't exist, and that's not what I'm advocating for. What does exist, and what a lot of people don't know, is a huge difference between three things: answering a question, providing identification when required by law, and starting to explain your entire immigration history to an agent who just approached you. These three things seem like the same thing in the heat of the moment, but legally, in the United States, they are not. The U.S. Constitution, through the Fifth Amendment, guarantees any person on American soil, citizen or not, the right against self-incrimination. This means you are not required to answer questions about where you were born, how you entered the country, or whether or not you have documentation just because an agent asked. This surprises a lot of people. People think this right is only for U.S. citizens. It's not. This right exists for any person physically present in the United States, regardless of their status. Now, this doesn't mean you can simply ignore an agent, be hostile, or refuse to cooperate with a lawful order. There's a difference between exercising a right and creating a confrontation. And that's exactly the line that separates someone who walks away from an encounter without major problems from someone who, without meaning to, turns a simple question into a legal snowball. The question, "What is your immigration status?" seems simple, but it's actually the starting point of a conversation that can go down very different paths depending on how you react. It can end in 30 seconds with no major consequences, or it can become the beginning of a deportation process, depending on what is said, how it's said, and what the person believes they need to prove in that moment. Before I give you the exact phrase that immigration lawyers recommend using, you need to understand the full picture. Because the phrase alone, without context, is useless. And the most common mistake doesn't happen with the question itself. It happens in the seconds that follow, when nervousness takes over. The agent asks what your immigration status is, and it's right after that, in the following seconds, that most people make the mistake that really complicates everything. Nervousness takes over, and what happens in practice is this. The person starts talking too much. They explain when they entered the United States, whether it was by plane, whether they crossed the border, how many years they've been living here. They mention where they live, who they live with, whether they have children born here, whether their spouse is a U.S. citizen. They mention that they already tried applying for a visa before, that they have a pending case somewhere, that they're waiting on a response from immigration. Within seconds, this person has told practically their entire life story to an agent who only asked one question. This isn't a lack of intelligence. It's a human reaction. When someone in a position of authority asks you something, the natural instinct is to answer, to explain yourself, to prove that you're a good person, that you're not doing anything wrong. The problem is that, legally, every piece of that voluntary information can later be used in a completely different context than the person imagined when they said it. A statement made in the heat of the moment, under pressure, without a lawyer present, can be recorded, noted down, and later interpreted in a way the person never intended. It's not that the agent is acting in bad faith. It's about how the system works. Anything said voluntarily can become part of a case. The real danger isn't necessarily in the initial question, but in what the person reveals right after it. Often the agent didn't even ask for that many details. The person got ahead of themselves, thinking they were defending themselves, when in fact, they were providing information they didn't need to provide. This is different from lying. This is different from refusing to cooperate. It's simply understanding that there is a space between staying completely silent and telling your whole life story. And it's exactly in that space that the safest answer lives. The answer that any experienced immigration lawyer would recommend in this moment. An answer that isn't hostile, isn't evasive, and doesn't put you in a worse position than you're already in. a phrase that protects your rights without making it seem like you're hiding something or defying the agent's authority. That's the phrase I'm going to show you now. Faced with an ICE agent asking about your immigration status, the legally safest response is this, said calmly and respectfully, "I choose to remain silent and I want to speak with an attorney." This phrase is not a trick, not a loophole in the law, and not disrespectful to the agent. It is the direct exercise of two rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, which protects you from self-incrimination, and the Sixth Amendment, which guarantees the right to legal counsel. You are simply informing the agent, clearly and politely, that you are exercising these rights. A lot of people are afraid to say this because they think it will look like they're confessing to something, or that it will irritate the agent and make things worse. It's the opposite. Immigration lawyers recommend exactly this phrase because it's neutral, it's not aggressive, and it makes clear that you know your rights without creating a confrontation. Silence is not synonymous with guilt. Invoking this right is not lying. It's not running away. It's not disrespect. It is legal protection, period. Now, it's important to distinguish between three things people often confuse. The first is remaining silent, which is what we just explained. You are not required to answer questions about your immigration situation. The second is refusing to comply with a lawful order, which is different and can bring serious consequences. For example, if an agent has a judicial warrant signed by a judge, you must comply with what that order requires. And the third is voluntarily providing information, which is exactly what we saw so many people do out of nervousness without realizing they didn't have to. Saying, "I choose to remain silent and I want to speak with an attorney," puts you in a clear position. You're not hiding anything, you're not being hostile, and you're not cooperating beyond what the law requires of you in that moment. You are simply waiting for legal guidance before saying anything about your life, your history, or your documentation. This phrase works whether it's a street stop, a knock at your front door, or during a detention. It doesn't solve everything on its own, and it won't automatically make the agent leave. But it protects you from harming yourself with your own words, while a legally sensitive situation is still unfolding. And saying this phrase is only the beginning. What happens right after it is just as important. And that's what we're going to talk about now. After invoking your right to remain silent and requesting the presence of a lawyer, that doesn't mean the encounter ends there, as if by magic. It means that from that moment on, you need to know how to behave so that it actually works in your favor. First, stay calm. Don't raise your voice. Don't make sudden movements. Don't try to walk away in the middle of the conversation. Physical resistance, even if it seems minor, even just pulling your arm away or refusing to stop, can be used against you and can turn a legally simple situation into an obstruction charge. Your body needs to be just as calm as your speech. Second, pay attention to what the agent is actually asking for. There's a huge difference between an agent starting a conversation, an agent asking for identification, and an agent with a judicial warrant signed by a judge. If it's a simple encounter in a public place, you can maintain your silence about your immigration status and respectfully ask whether you are being detained or are free to leave. If the agent says you are being detained, you hold your position and wait for a lawyer to arrive. If they say you are free to go, you can calmly leave. The situation changes when it involves your home. If ICE agents knock on your door, you are not required to open it unless they present a judicial warrant signed by a judge, not an administrative warrant from ICE itself, which is different and does not require you to allow entry. You can ask to see the document slipped under the door or through a window before deciding anything. This doesn't mean every type of question can be ignored in every circumstance. There are situations with specific legal obligations, such as during a traffic stop, where you may be required to present a driver's license or vehicle registration, depending on the state. The right to remain silent protects you from speaking about your immigration status, but it doesn't replace specific administrative obligations that exist independently of your immigration situation. The main point here is this: exercising your rights is not the same as confrontation. You can be firm, respectful, and legally protected all at the same time. It's not about defying the agent, it's about knowing exactly where mandatory cooperation ends and your constitutional protection begins. An encounter handled this way tends to be quick and without major complications, because you gave the agent no reason to push further, no contradiction to exploit, and no voluntary information to use later. This preparation only works if it happens before the moment of tension. Nobody thinks clearly with an agent standing in front of them. So save the contact of a trusted immigration lawyer in advance and share it with your family. Know which documents to keep on hand for your situation, but never present a false or altered document that turns an administrative matter into a criminal one. Never lie about your situation. Never physically resist. Never act in a way that could look like obstruction. This doesn't weaken your rights. It's exactly what keeps your position legally solid. Silence, calm, and respect protect you. Confrontation doesn't. And remember the difference between a judicial warrant signed by a judge and an ICE administrative warrant. Only the first requires you to let anyone into your home. In the end, the goal isn't fear, it's clarity. Know the right phrase? Stay calm and wait for legal guidance before speaking about your own life. That's how you get through the moment protected, not exposed. If this video helped you better understand your rights, like it now, because that helps this content reach more people who need to know this. And subscribe to the channel, because every week I bring clear, straightforward information about your rights here in the United States. No legal jargon, no runaround, just what you really need to know to protect yourself. See you in the next video.